This lovely manhwa is titled Villainess Surviving with Corporate Slave Skills. If you love stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps us a lot. At the artificial island owned by the Empire near the capital, at exactly 6 p.m., a social gathering was taking place. It was an event attended only by a selected few, including the Crown Prince himself. On the other hand, there was Sarah, who had reincarnated as a villainess at this very same gathering. She was so shocked that she kept wondering why she was even here. She wept, thinking to herself that if she had known she was going to get possessed like this, she would never have paid for her car in full instead of using installments. She continued crying while thinking about her credit card payments. She regretted not sleeping peacefully in the office nap room. If she hadn't gone all the way to the movie theater, skipped lunch, and booked an empty cinema on a weekday afternoon, none of this would have happened, right? That day, after getting to the theater, she leaned her back against the seat to take a short nap. Then, a message suddenly appeared. Possession alert issued today at 12:07 p.m. A gate has appeared 8.5 kilometers south of the capital. To protect yourself from zombies, remain indoors and beware of infection. Already exhausted, she angrily pressed a random button just to make it disappear. When she closed her eyes and opened them again, she found herself here. She remembered that her friend at work had texted her that morning saying the villainess in a story looked exactly like her and even had the same name, so she should read it when she had time. It was a romance fantasy novel with every genre mixed together: zombie, horror, survival, R18, and more. Sarah couldn't believe it. She had literally possessed the villainess with the same name and face as hers. Unable to hold it in anymore, she shouted in anger, asking what all of this was supposed to mean. The villainess in this novel was a real piece of garbage. Sarah couldn't understand why this was happening to her, of all people. How could she possess the body of a famous villainess, someone so selfish and known for dragging everyone around? Sitting alone on a chair at the gathering, she could already tell they were talking trash about her. Some ladies stood in a corner, judging her expression. One whispered that she looked like she was on edge. Another added that maybe she was about to start another scene. But then they noticed something strange. She was unusually quiet today. Sarah pouted, thinking to herself that this makes no sense. What did she even do? She was just a victim who got possessed without knowing why. She sighed with her eyes closed, mumbling to herself that this had to be a dream. In 50 minutes, her alarm would ring, and even if it didn't, a theater staff member would surely come to wake her up in 3 minutes. She looked around at everyone again and told herself she needed to calm down and understand the situation first. Sarah had learned a skill in her 3rd year as a working adult. Observe first when you don't know what's going on. 1 minute passed. Sarah couldn't believe she was still possessed. She smacked her face in annoyance, thinking about how she barely remembered the plot. She had only skimmed the story and didn't even read it to the end. She had focused only on the parts where the villainess, Sarah, appeared and read up to the point where she met a gruesome death. After that, she closed the screen, thinking something like, a fun introductory French would have been way better. But now, seeing the main characters in front of her, she realized this really was the world of the novel. There was the male lead, the cold, aloof-looking crown prince with black hair, Praha. Then the second male lead, a gentle, smiling man with a sweet face, the southern Grand Duke, Cyprus. And finally, the female lead, Lena, the heroine. When Sarah saw Lena, she was amazed. She had never seen naturally pink hair before. But then again, this was a fantasy world, so it made sense. She also noticed how strange it was that the unsociable crown prince was going out of his way to host such a small gathering. It was all just an excuse to see this woman. That's why Lena, who wasn't even a noble, was here. Sarah sighed when she remembered that she was the one who bullied the heroine. That's why the crown prince didn't like her at all. He wasn't showing it clearly, only because of his quiet personality and his public image. Originally, in the novel, Sarah always tried to make time to talk to him, but he constantly pushed her away, saying he didn't have time. She used to yell at him because he wouldn't even let her say what she wanted. That was the kind of relationship they had. As for the Southern Duke, the man who always smiled, he had known Sarah since childhood. When everyone disliked her as a child, he was the only one who showed her kindness. She mistook that kindness for love and confessed to him. He coldly asked her why in the world he would ever like her. He hugged her back then, apologizing, saying he didn't love her and that he disliked her too. Poor villainess, she actually lived a terrible life. Even the one person who showed her care did it out of pure pity. Remembering all this, Sarah thought to herself that this was why the villainous Sarah hated the Grand Duke, and why the Grand Duke also became completely indifferent toward her. The heroine, Lena, on the other hand, was always afraid, and that was because Sarah had bullied her relentlessly. Normally, she would have picked a fight with Lena at a moment like this, but Sarah concluded she wouldn't. She was a capable woman who didn't butt in without reason. Then suddenly, she remembered. The incident in the novel should be happening now. At exactly 7 p.m., the bell rang. The guests looked around in confusion, wondering why everything was suddenly so quiet. One of them pointed out that it might be because they were on an island. Another realized that the butler still hadn't returned, and neither had the maids. One of the guards decided to go and check. The moment he opened the door, a zombie appeared, its direction shifting straight toward them as soon as the door opened. The guards slayed it instantly. Everyone froze in shock. Praha and Cypress immediately stepped in front of Lena, blocking her and telling her to step back as she asked in panic what was going on. Other guests began shouting, asking what the hell that thing was. The moment Sarah saw it, she thought to herself, it already started. This novel is a zombie horror survival R18 romance, and the survival begins here. On the second floor of the Imperial Villa, inside a sealed room, there were only 9 survivors. That included Sarah, Praha, Cypress, Lena, and 5 other guests. One of the men scoffed and asked what this disgusting thing was. He was clearly irritated. He concluded that it must already be dead as he poked it with his foot. Sarah watched from a distance, thinking to herself that she was glad she wasn't the squeamish type. She remembered that the man who just spoke was the Crown Prince's cousin, and she couldn't believe he was actually touching it. The man suddenly groaned, saying how gross it was and that someone should clean it up already. Sarah angrily decided that from now on, she would call him Scumbag. One of the ladies asked fearfully who that thing even was. Another replied that it might be an assassin sent from the Republic. Cypress immediately stepped in, telling them not to jump to conclusions, and said the real question was why there was no one else outside. Sarah thought to herself that these reactions were expected. No one here knew what a zombie was. They had no way of imagining that the thing they believed was dead was actually a walking corpse that could infect others. She decided to stay quiet and watch how it would play out. One person argued, asking how an outsider could even enter the island. Another lady replied that it didn't make sense since one needed permission to enter the island. That was why they left their guards and maids behind in the first place. Another guest asked nervously if something terrible had happened. The truth is, the palace itself was still fine. The zombies didn't enter through a gate or portal, they fell from the sky above the island. One of the ladies asked where all the palace maids and guards were. Only Sarah knew the answer. They were all infected. The group grew more uneasy, wondering how they were supposed to be protected if this was really an attack, since there were only 2 knights present. Sarah sighed, thinking how frustrating it was that she couldn't tell them the truth, that everyone outside this room was already infected. She opened her eyes when someone suddenly called out to her. "Are you all right?" Praha asked, his voice filled with concern. Looking at him closely, she noticed how his black hair fell softly over his forehead, his masculine neck, and his refined eyes that shone effortlessly. He was the one who ended Sarah's life in the novel. She replied that she was fine, while thinking to herself that his features were far too perfect and that somehow made it even creepier. Praha looked at her worriedly and told her she looked pale. She replied that it was just fatigue. He told her that at times like this, it was best not to be alone. She stood up and said she understood, thinking to herself that he was actually telling her to read the room. Praha then told everyone to assess the situation. He turned to Kiman and Darjeeling, asking what it was like outside the room. They bowed and reported to His Grace that there were no maids or guards nearby. However, they had found a male servant collapsed near the central staircase. The moment Sarah heard that, she thought to herself, a death flag had been raised. In the novel, what happened next was clear. The Crown Prince would send 2 of his knights to bring the collapsed servant into the hallway. It would appear that he died from a puncture wound to the heart, and one of his arms was missing. They would try to investigate what injured him and what kind of weapon was used. Then, the servant, presumed dead, would twitch. The moment a knight moved closer, shouting that the man was alive, the zombie would rise violently. That was the first incident where everyone learned about the existence of zombies. Sarah knew that even if she warned them not to bring the servant in, they wouldn't listen. Everyone saw her as a nuisance. But if things continued like this, one of those two knights would die. Praha grabbed a rope and told his guards to bring the man over while he guarded the room. He warned them to be careful and not touch the body carelessly. He told them to first confirm that the man was truly dead before using the rope to restrain him. Kimon was surprised and asked why they would restrain a corpse. Praha replied calmly that it was better to be safe. Watching from the side, Sarah knew a rope like that was practically useless. She wished they wouldn't interfere, but these people were far too curious. She didn't even realize when she shouted for them to wait. Everyone turned to look at her, and she couldn't believe she had actually done that. They brought the corpse inside. Kimon scoffed and asked why that woman was giving orders as if she were His Majesty's fiancée. Darjeeling replied that it wouldn't hurt to be cautious in situations like this. Sarah handed them a handkerchief and told them to confirm the man was dead and stuff the cloth into his mouth. She warned them to be very careful and not allow it to bite them. Kimon yelled at her, telling her to be ridiculous. He asked if she really thought a corpse could move. Darjeeling didn't really want to follow her instructions, but something about her expression felt genuine. In the end, he decided to pretend to follow her advice, just in case, and to avoid getting bitten. When the guards brought the corpse closer, Sarah hid behind Cypress, clearly irritated, and covered her nose. She thought to herself that she just wanted to go home. "Sarah, it's dangerous, so please step back," Cypress said. She was surprised, wondering what was wrong with him all of a sudden and why everyone was watching her. She carefully watched to see if they placed the handkerchief properly, then regretted not telling them to break the corpse's jaw first. Praha asked Kimon why he hadn't used the handkerchief. Kimon replied that the man was already dead, just a corpse, and that he didn't want to waste Lady Sarah's precious handkerchief on something like that. Sarah was completely shocked. She shouted for them to forget about the handkerchief and get away from the corpse immediately. Kimon smiled, lifting the corpse's head, telling her it was already dead, so there was no need. Before he could finish his sentence, the corpse moved. Kimon froze in shock. Cypress immediately covered Sarah's eyes as she screamed for them to watch out. Kimon was bitten on the face. Everyone gasped in horror. Praha quickly cut off the corpse's head and asked Kimon if he was all right. He looked at Lady Sarah strangely, thinking it was unbelievable that a corpse had bitten him. "So this is what you were trying to warn us about," Praha said, thanking her for making it possible for Kimon to escape death. Sarah replied that he didn't, while thinking to herself, the bite was already on his face, near the brain. She could tell that knight was already dead. Before anyone could react, Kimon's body began to change. He transformed completely into a zombie, and Darjeeling had no choice but to slay him on the spot. Kimon caused his own death. If he had trusted the lady even once, he wouldn't have died like this. The Crown Prince's cousin couldn't take it anymore. He covered his mouth, rushed to a corner, and vomited everything out. The other ladies were in shock, asking how was it possible that a corpse could move and that those bitten became infected? One lady closed her eyes, whispering that this had to be a dream. Praha turned to Cypress and said that if the palace was in the same state, they couldn't possibly expect rescue. Cypress replied that they needed to get out of here before they were completely overrun. Lena grabbed Praha's hand, asking worriedly about the others. She insisted that there must still be people hiding somewhere who couldn't escape in time, and that they needed to save them. Watching this, Sarah thought to herself, how will the two male leads react now? She glared at them silently, wondering what they would do in this situation. Would they follow the words of the cute heroine? Now, the remaining survivors were Sarah, Lena, Praha, Cypress, the ladies, Mascarpone, Consomme, Papli, the Crown Prince's cousin, and Darjeeling. Kimon was eliminated. Sarah frowned, thinking to herself that this was supposed to be a romance fantasy novel. Cypress apologized to Lena, explaining that in a situation like this, they didn't know who was still alive. They couldn't recklessly search the mansion, especially when there were 5 people who couldn't contribute to a fight at all. Sarah was surprised. They didn't immediately agree with the heroine. Lena tried to argue, but Praha calmly told her that they should assume everyone else was already dead. Judging by the fact that no one had come running, there likely was no one left. The other ladies understood Lena's concern, but Cypress stepped forward and told them to organize the situation. First, the corpse had moved, and to stop them, their heads must be severed. Second, someone who was bitten became infected. Third, from now on, they should aim to escape the island using a portal. Praha pointed out that they were in the innermost room on the second floor. The main portal they used to arrive on the island was outside the villa. However, according to the map, there was a sub-portal used for transporting supplies located in the kitchen. They decided to head for the kitchen. Sarah, on the other hand, crouched down, thinking that for now they needed to prepare their equipment. She picked up a paper knife, and immediately Darjeeling leaned toward her. He asked if she was all right. Sarah looked surprised and asked what he meant. Looking down shyly, he said she looked shaken and thanked her for the advice she gave earlier. Sarah smiled, calling him by his name, and told him she was just glad he didn't die. She held his hand happily and begged him to survive no matter what, saying he was the only one who worried about her. Lena, Praha, and Cypress were all shocked by the sight. Sarah blinked in confusion, wondering why everyone was staring at her. Did she say something weird? Lady Mascarpone smirked and said that Lady Sarah wasn't the type to worry about anyone. Lady Mascarpone was a supporting character, the next highest ranking woman after Sarah in this group. Her family owned a shop that specialized in magical goods, like the magical strings the Crown Prince carried. Lady Mascarpone asked what good a weapon would even do in Sarah's hands. She warned her not to swing it around and cause trouble. Lady Consomme told her to stop already, but Mascarpone refused. She said it was dangerous enough as it was, and that she didn't need Sarah causing chaos beside her. "Your name is Mascarpone, right? And next to you is tiramisu, right?" Her lady replied with a childish expression, "No." Sarah immediately knew she had made a mistake. Without hesitation, Sarah tore her dress shorter and tied her hair up, saying they should all grab weapons too, because she wasn't entrusting her life to anyone else. Mascarpone stared at her in shock, asking what she thought she was doing. Sarah walked over to the dead knight and pulled off his military boots, leaving the ladies frozen in disbelief that she touched a corpse. She even took out a pair of slippers and dropped them on the floor, thinking she would wear the boots instead. The ladies were completely confused. Sarah smiled and told them to wear the shoes instead of trying to run in heels. She thought to herself that her equipment was finally complete, all thanks to the zombies. Then she suddenly remembered that the zombie earlier had something glowing on its chest. Meanwhile, Lena was giving blessings for fatigue recovery and stamina replenishment. Cypress smiled and told her that wasn't something small. Lena had been raised as a commoner in the temple before being accepted into noble society, and she possessed holy power. Sarah thought to herself that Lena's holy power was only enough to heal a paper cut. She should have become the most famous priest in the empire, but the gods here were stingy. They didn't give much power. Papley, seeing this, shouted angrily, asking why she hadn't used that power from the start and made him lose a meat shield. He added that she wasn't even supposed to be here from the first place. Lena apologized softly, looking sad. Sarah was stunned. She couldn't believe he had just called the dead knight a meat shield. 100 insults rushed into her mind, ready to be thrown at him. Before she could speak, Mascarpone yelled at Papley to stop it already. She snapped that the knight didn't die from overwork, and Lena's blessing wasn't defensive magic. Sarah felt strangely touched by how Mascarpone bit at everyone equally. She pushed Papley aside to stop him from arguing with the others, but Papley kept cursing at Mascarpone anyway. The group began moving. As they walked down the second-floor hallway, Cypress approached Sarah and quietly told her she seemed very different today. Praha glanced at them from ahead, and even he could tell she really was unusual compared to how she normally acted. Sarah asked if he meant she looked more exhausted than usual. Cypress smiled and shook his head. He said that wasn't it. The atmosphere around her felt different, and on top of that, she had just helped Lena. Sarah sighed and replied that it wasn't her who helped Lena, it was Mascarpone. She told him to stop talking to her because she didn't want to talk at all. It was tiring. Just then, Praha walked over and signaled for them to be quiet. Sarah's eyes widened. In front of them was a group of zombies packed tightly together. Everyone froze in shock. Lena got startled and took a step back, accidentally stepping on Sarah's toe. Before they knew it, both of them fell to the ground. Praha and Cypress immediately reached out their hands. Sarah tried to grab one and stand up, only to realize they were reaching for Lena, not her. She awkwardly scratched her head, thinking to herself that she already knew it wouldn't be her. Poor Villainess. 2 people fell and they only helped 1. These people are always the ones turning innocent people to villains. Sarah thought to herself that she had 0 votes while all the votes went to Lena. What an unfortunate result. She stood up on her own, mumbling that she had seen this kind of scene before. The 2 leads helped Lena up. Lena turned to Sarah with a sad expression and called out to her apologetically, but Sarah told her she was fine. When she looked down at her hand, she noticed a cut and the paper knife was broken. What a waste. Lady Mascarpone actually warned her not to hold that. Mascarpone and Consomme watched closely. Mascarpone told her that the cut only happened because she was holding a knife. Cypress apologized to her, and Praha was about to say something too, but Sarah stopped them. She said it was fine and that she really didn't mind. Being apologized to only made her feel more miserable. Besides, she was sure she would return to her original world. There, she would make friends, real ones. Lena suddenly went down on her knees, begging Sarah to forgive her, saying it was all her fault and that she should let her treat the injury. Sarah told her to stop it already. She was really fine. "Lady Sarah," Lena cried. Sarah told her to do something about her heels if she truly felt sorry. "If you have time to treat me, why not fix your own foot that's sprained?" she said, then urged everyone to move quickly. Something felt off. When she told them to move, they couldn't go forward. At the central staircase, where they were supposed to patrol, there was now a pile of corpses. There was another staircase on the opposite side, but it was too far. After cutting down a walking corpse, Cypress told them that's all of them. He added that the last one looked like someone who tried to block the zombies from reaching their room, but got bitten in the process. He suggested that instead of staying on the staircase, they should rest in a nearby room. Consomme immediately agreed. She was already exhausted. Inside a spare room on the second floor, they all sat down. Mascarpone sighed, saying she hoped there wouldn't be any more moving corpses. Cypress replied, judging by how the servants had collapsed near the backroom hallway, there must be many more corpses elsewhere in the palace. Mascarpone asked how the corpses managed to fall near the back room when knights were guarding the stairs. Praha answered they likely used the servants' passages. Since those passages ran inside the walls, movement would be quick and unnoticed. That's probably how they got close to the back room before being stopped. At that moment, Sarah had an idea. She smiled, thinking about the routes they had gotten here, and suddenly saw a key point. She suggested that they use the same servants' passage to get downstairs. Since the central staircase was unstable, using that passage would be faster. Praha pointed out that there was a high chance the corpse that tore off the servant's arm was still inside that passage. Sarah sighed. She hadn't even considered that. She then said their only hope was the left staircase. Praha reminded her that it was quite far and asked if there was really no other way. Mascarpone asked how far it was. Praha explained that from the back door to their current room was a long distance, and once they reached the first floor, they would still have to move back toward the center. Lena said sadly that it was very far. She touched her heels gently. Papley suddenly spoke up, asking why she couldn't even treat herself properly, yet was going around giving others blessings they never asked for. Oops, this man is so savage, and not nice at all. Sarah glanced at Lena and couldn't believe she hadn't used her power from the start. Papley turned to the others and said it would be better to escape with the men first. Cypress looked at Praha, and Praha glanced back at Papley. With people slowing us down, if even we can't escape, then it's a disaster, right? Papley said. I could carry one burden, but 4? Hearing that, Sarah cursed him in her mind. Praha told him that was enough. Cypress added that if Papley was making such a rational judgment, then they were free to make an emotional one too. Papley scoffed and said not all men should leave. He pointed at Darjeeling and said that knight should stay behind since he didn't care even if he died. Sarah moved before she even realized it. This man is really trash. She spoke up sharply, saying she wouldn't ignore what he just said and she wouldn't let it slide. Papley was confused. Sarah smiled and said he clearly called her a burden when he himself wasn't even among the 2 sturdy men, meaning he was the bigger burden. Praha and Cypress were speechless. Sarah continued, correcting him, saying Lena wasn't a burden. She had holy power. Papley shouted back that with such weak power, Lena couldn't even heal her own foot. He added that he never said they would abandon her, just leave her behind with someone who could wield a sword. Sarah snapped, asking why Lena should be left with Darjeeling when Darjeeling was also a man who couldn't properly wield a sword. By his logic, that meant Darjeeling was also a burden. Papley clenched his fist in anger. Sarah chuckled and added that no one could even carry him. That pushed him over the edge. Papley raised his hand, about to slap her. Everyone gasped. Praha rushed forward instantly. Sarah smelled alcohol as Papley lunged closer. She couldn't believe he was drunk in a situation like this. She shut her eyes, thinking the blow would land, but when she opened them, Praha had pinned Papley to the ground. Praha angrily ordered him to apologize to Sarah, or else he would be the one left behind in this room. I fully agree with you, Praha. He's such a loudmouth who only cares about surviving himself. Cypress laughed and said that, more importantly, they should just take Papley along and use him as a shield. Praha called out to Papley again. Grinding his teeth, Papley muttered an apology. Sarah calmly said it wasn't a problem. Papley couldn't believe she said that after he had just been pinned down. Praha told everyone to rest a little longer before moving out. Sarah sat back with the others, muttering to herself that these people were really something else. Why would they act like this when their survival depended on working together? Still, she felt strangely refreshed. She had said exactly what she felt, helped someone, and shut down a scumbag. So much for her rule about not sticking her nose into other people's business. That rule was completely broken. After resting for a while, Consomme complained sadly that her feet hurt. Cypress leaned toward her and said it was because the soles of her shoes were too thin. "If only we had thicker socks," he said. Consomme tried that even maid socks would do because it felt like her legs were going to turn bulky and muscular. Sarah watched from across the room, thinking she finally understood why they were wasting time like this. With people like this, it had been impossible from the start. She remembered the route, the left staircase, then the kitchen. Even though she felt tired already, she rode the subway and walked to work every day. For noble ladies who only drink tea all day, this must feel like torture. She suddenly remembered something else. Since she possessed Sarah's body, and Sarah looked just like her and had the same name, her arms and legs felt fine for now. But what about her stamina? Sarah turned to Lena and asked if her injured ankle felt better. Lena replied sadly that she tried using her ability, but it hadn't fully recovered yet. Praha leaned closer and told Lena there was no need to apologize. Watching this, Cypress noticed Praha was clearly protecting Lena. He decided he would focus on backing up Sarah instead. He knelt in front of Sarah and asked her to show her hand. Surprised, she handed it to him. He wrapped it gently with his handkerchief and asked if she had any other injuries. She said no. Cypress smiled and said she seemed really tough earlier. She scolded him, saying she wasn't. Lady Mascarpone clicked her tongue and told them to stop pretending and be honest. She accused Sarah of liking attention and said she was clearly using this chance to get the Grand Duke's focus. Sarah felt a strong sense of déjà vu. Why is she always so sarcastic? Cypress told both of them not to be on edge. Sarah wondered why he said that when she hadn't even spoken. "Enough fighting," Cypress said with a charming smile. "Let this Northern Grand Duke heal your hand properly." Sarah smiled and asked if he was serious. After finishing the bandage, Cypress looked at her and asked if she thought he had a great body. Sarah blinked and asked if he had never looked in a mirror before. He chuckled and said he had, but hearing it directly was embarrassing. He shyly explained what he meant. Understanding, Sarah turned her head away. That was when she noticed Praha cutting off the heels of Lena's shoes. He said he should have done that from the beginning. Sarah fell silent. She couldn't help thinking that the Crown Prince and the Northern Duke were strangely watching her reactions. Then Praha called out to Papley and said he didn't consider anyone there to be baggage. They were all guests, and if he hadn't invited them, they wouldn't be in the situation. He said none of them would attend a royal invitation if they were labeled burdens, but right now what matters is everyone's safety, and that responsibility is his. Hearing this, Papley looked a little ashamed. The break ended, and they started moving again. Papley walked in front, Sarah stayed at the back. She had no desire to walk near that scumbag. Suddenly, Papley hit the wall hard. The ladies cried out in concern. He was still angry from being scolded. This foolish man hasn't learned his lesson. Cypress asked him to stop already because doing that might attract the zombies. Sarah sighed, thinking to herself that he was so pathetic for taking his anger out on the wall. Suddenly, Sarah turned around and was shocked to see a crowd of zombies coming from behind. She called out to Praha, asking if the servants from earlier might have used the servant passage and where exactly that passage led to. Praha replied that it was right next to the inner room where they were at first. Sarah was stunned. She asked if the servant with the slashed arm had really closed the passage door behind him. She glanced at Papley, and before they knew it, they had to start running because their lives were in danger. While running, Sarah wondered where the Crown Prince was because she noticed he was not running with them. She saw him far behind and wondered what he was doing there. She could not believe he was setting a trap in a situation like this. She shouted from behind, asking if he was trying to get himself erased or what. Praha stood up and asked why she was not running away with the others, and she yelled back that it was because he was not running away. He looked surprised, and before she knew it, he asked her to excuse him and instantly lifted her up. She was shocked. He told her to hold on, and he gently carried her away. They were chased by the zombies at a fast pace. They were shocked that the zombies even destroyed the trap. He told her to run, and she wondered how she was supposed to run when he was literally carrying her in his arms. She knew this was really bad, and they all kept running, even though it was terrifying. Cypress reached an entrance and called them to get in immediately. They all went in and stayed quiet. Cypress shut the curtains, and the zombies remained outside. They all sat on the ground in exhaustion, while Praha still held on to Sarah. She tried to speak, but he told her to remain quiet because there was no door here. Sarah felt even more terrified. She could not believe they were hiding in a room with no door while zombies were outside. Things were becoming more and more dangerous lately, and Praha was so close that she could barely breathe. She pushed him away at once, telling him to put her down immediately. He realized and gently put her down. Sarah peeked outside and knew at once that getting to the window without being seen was almost impossible. She panicked when she noticed there were too many of them. They had to camp there for a while to see if the zombies would leave. In this inner room, before reaching the kitchen, there was still a long distance to go. She wished there was an exit on the other side. Cypress asked why she was peeking in a place like that. Darjeeling quickly told him, in a whisper, that his voice was too loud. Cypress replied that it was fine. After all, the ones who came after him were always the loud ones, and also foreign princesses who decided to marry him because of some divine revelation. Sarah couldn't believe there were women like that. Cypress said he had looked around and it seemed quieter deeper inside. Praha asked if there were any entrances or exits. Everyone was shocked when Cypress said there were none. They realized there was only one entrance, and it was the one they came through. Sarah knew instantly that they were trapped. She turned, and her eyes fell on Lady Mascarpone. She remembered there was something she wanted to ask her. Sarah sat across from her and asked if she had any useful items. Mascarpone looked confused, and Sarah reminded her that her family ran a magic goods trading company. So, did she have any self-defense items? The lady snapped that she didn't have any. She said she left everything at the palace and that there was no way she could have known something like this would happen. Sarah wondered why she was snapping at her, but then she remembered the reason she was being so prickly. A few years ago, at a party venue, Mascarpone scoffed at Sarah for not following the dress code and called her uncouth. An enraged Sarah grabbed Mascarpone and they fought endlessly. Sarah was already notorious to begin with, but Mascarpone supposedly couldn't even go out for a while after that. Sarah now realized why Mascarpone was snapping at her. She must have thought she was being sarcastic, and it wasn't like Sarah meant it that way. Sarah apologized immediately, saying she was just asking. Cypress approached, and Sarah asked if she could go deeper inside. Praha asked why, and she said she wanted to do some sightseeing. He permitted her to go. While walking in, Sarah thought to herself that if she had not provoked that Papley guy, they would not be trapped in this room right now, because if he had not hit the wall, then the zombies would not have come after them. She knew she needed to find a way to break through the situation. After all, she was the protagonist, and she would not die here, right? So there had to be a way. Just then, she noticed the broccoli, the emperor of the empire blessed by the 12 gods, the king who ruled the continent where the sun never sets, the glory of the imperial house, eternal and undying. Sarah hit the table with a golden cup, thinking to herself that she could read it. She looked around and it seemed like a gallery displaying imperial treasures. She walked around with the cup in her hand, thinking she must find something useful here. She held the cup over her head, praying for it to grant her strength. She needed the gods to help her escape. She tried hard to remember how people escaped from zombies in movies. She tried so hard to think. Just then, Cypress's voice came from behind and she freaked out, letting go of the cup at once as he asked if she wanted it. He caught the cup before it fell. He whispered to her that this villa was originally a birthing house, so Praha was born and stayed here for half a year. He smiled and told her that the cup was from that time. "Even if you take it, no one would notice," he said. She glared at him and asked if really no one would notice. She reminded him that the gods were watching, and more importantly, His Grace would expose it. She declined, saying she could not accept it. Cypress was surprised and asked if he really thought His Grace would expose it. He blocked her way and asked if he had ever done something that put her at a disadvantage. She told him directly that it was a waste of effort, but she thanked him anyway. Cypress asked if she was perhaps bothered by what happened earlier. She wondered what he meant, then remembered that they didn't even help her when she fell. Sarah smiled and said, "People only feel disappointed when their expectations are betrayed. But I had no expectations of either of you to begin with." She smiled genuinely. "Yes, girl, show them that they actually mean nothing to you." Cypress noticed that Sarah had tied her hair. Before now, he knew her as someone who never agreed to tie her hair no matter what. In fact, she always worried her hairstyle would get messed up and tried her best not to move her neck suddenly. But now she was wearing boots, her dress was torn, and everything about her looked strange from the beginning, and now she was saying things like she didn't care about anyone. Sarah thought to herself that she actually had some pride. She even told Cypress that if the man she liked was drowning together with him, she would save the one she liked and let him drown, so he shouldn't worry. He smiled and said, "The one she likes is Praha, right?" He also added that Praha ignored her and reached out to Lena instead. Sarah sighed, thinking that was actually true, but she told him she would find another man. She thought to herself that she would never fall for a man like him. Unreturned love was not her style, and they were from different worlds anyway. Plus, he was so tall and would probably be hard to kiss. It was a shame that the one who liked him was not her, but the original Sarah. Cypress burst out laughing and told her not to make him laugh. She said he was the one who started laughing. He told her that her face and her words did not match, and that she looked like his butler whenever he said something stupid. Sarah thought to herself that she felt sorry for the butler. She turned away in annoyance and told him to go back. He pointed out that she was going the wrong direction, and she froze when she saw something. They saw a corpse behind a shelf, and he smiled, saying, "This is why I came with you." She leaned closer to it, and Cypress asked, "Are you all right?" She asked if the Archduke took this corpse down too. He told her that Darjeeling was the one who cut its neck, and he was literally just watching. Sarah was shocked. She thought to herself never to make an enemy out of Darjeeling. Cypress immediately asked what she was doing when she lifted the corpse's hand. She thought to herself that this guy also had that shining marble on his chest. She did not know what it was, but she decided she needed to take it for now. Maybe it'll be useful later. Seeing this, Cypress asked in confusion if it was someone she knew. She remembered the servant. He was the first person who talked to her after her possession. She told Cypress it was nothing important. Then she suggested they cut up all the corpses and smear them all over themselves. Maybe that way they could blend in with the zombies and escape. She remembered there was a movie like that. Cypress laughed, saying she always came up with the weirdest ideas, and if that would actually work, why would they have been running for their lives? She told him the plan was useful and they would need at least 3 corpses for that, and if only he was shorter, then it would have worked. He jokingly told her that was a shame, especially with him and Praha being so sturdy. This is so hilarious, he is literally using her own words against her. Cypress asked if she was not afraid of corpses, and she replied that of course she was. She thought to herself that what was even scarier was her possessing a novel character. She told him she was scared, like she might die. He smiled and said she was really different today from usual. She asked him in what way, and he told her that even though she was scared, she still tried to help those knights earlier. She told him it was not something she could ignore in a situation like that. He chuckled and said normally she would not have even given it a thought. Sarah frowned, thinking that the real Sarah must have been a psychopath. Cypress glanced at her and said it really made him wonder. She looked at him, and he told her that since they were so sturdy, that meant her plans would not work, right? He suggested they look another way around, while reaching out his hand to her, saying, "Just the 2 of us." She grabbed his hand and they both moved ahead. They reached another side and she wondered why he kept looking at her. Sarah asked if it would be a big deal if something went missing. Looking at a cup, she noticed it was chipped and asked why. He told her that His Majesty tried to take it from the temple back then and there was a lot of opposition. Sarah thought to herself that this guy was royalty too, and his rank in the line of succession should be higher than Praha's because he literally knew everything. Sarah suddenly stopped when she saw something. It was a palm-sized statue of a reaper decorated with jewels. Lying beside it was a pure white tiara worn by the first empress at her coronation, and also the staff used by the previous emperor. That was exactly what the Archduke told her. Sarah took out a golden skull and asked, "What is this?" He looked irritated and told her it is the skull of a royal who died young and was coated in pure gold. "No way," she shouted, shoving it into his hand and telling him to take it back. He joked, "Since you're here, why don't you say hello? He's my uncle." Her eyes were shut in irritation as she told him to take it away already. Then her eyes widened in realization. They both looked at each other and knew they had just thought of the same thing. They might actually be able to escape this room. Sarah ran back to the room where the others were and shouted that I found a good way. Praha collected the skull from her and asked what the matter was. While she was about to step closer to tell him, she slipped and fell straight into his arms, her lips brushing against his neck. They both froze in shock. Someone the original Sarah never got to touch like this, now she is literally doing it non-stop. Back then, when Sarah got up on her own while the two leads only helped one person up even though two people had fallen, Praha felt a sudden pang of guilt as if he were the villain. Her smile, which was clearly to cover up her embarrassment, and her hand that had reached out with no one taking it, stayed in his mind. Sarah had been pulled back with nowhere to go, and everyone had witnessed that moment. The look in her eyes back then kept haunting Praha's thoughts. Back to the present, Sarah couldn't believe she had just kissed him on the neck. She turned away at once in shock, wondering if anyone saw that. She noticed that the other ladies had surrounded Cypress, and she felt so relieved that no one seemed to have seen it. She did not know that Cypress actually did, but he looked away when she turned. Praha was too nervous to even say a word. Sarah pulled away and nervously explained that she did not mean to kiss him. He held on to her and said he understood. She was still embarrassed that she had kissed him out of nowhere. She remembered how she wore corpse boots, how she put a scumbag in his place, and now she had made things even worse by kissing a stranger. She knew this was really the peak of it all. She tried to shake it off by telling him that he should always lean down when she tried to talk to him because she could not reach his ear due to his height. He apologized and she shyly asked him to lend her his ear. She whispered to him that those things sensed their surroundings through smell and sound. She showed him the skull and said she was thinking of using it. He said that might actually work because, judging by their behavior, it seemed they were blind. Sarah stepped closer and asked if he was sure about this since the skull belonged to his relative. Praha told her that his relative would not be able to rest in peace if he became a skeleton himself trying to protect one. She told him that was how it was supposed to be, thinking to herself that she was glad he was not someone who worshipped ancestors too much. Sarah chuckled and said they would ask for forgiveness once they were safe and also promised to hold him a proper memorial service. A memorial service? He asked. She smiled and said it was done by setting out good food for the ancestors to eat, and she was sure they would be delighted with His Highness. Sarah imagined Praha cooking and thought to herself she would be completely mesmerized watching him cook with those muscular arms. Sarah slowly opened the curtains, aiming for a spot, but Praha touched her from behind and said he would throw it. She handed the skull back, saying she would leave it to the descendant to do the throwing. As Praha raised it, Sarah prayed in her mind for the ancestors to guide the way. The skull crashed through the glass, and all the zombies' attention shifted. Sarah watched as they rushed in the direction where the skulls fell, just as expected. She smiled, thinking this must really be the ancestors helping them, and since they did, a large memorial service would surely be held for them. She looked up at Praha behind her and told him to make sure there was plenty of food for the ancestors. He smiled and said he would do his best. Cypress frowned as he watched how close the two of them were. Don't tell me he is actually jealous. Didn't he reject Sarah's love? He deserves any attitude she shows him. And believe me when I say I'm rooting for Praha. Cypress tapped Praha on the shoulder, smiling, and said they should head out. The two of them turned and looked at him. Who do you think is best for our girl, Sarah? Don't forget to leave comments on your favorite scene, besties. This is where this part of the story ends. If you love this story and you want us to continue, please comment the protagonist's name, Sarah.